Go ahead.
Okay, good. Whatever you did.
So I think you hired like the Norwegian ski team or something.
No, the Norwegian, the various countries were skiing. It was an international event. And I took the second team, the backup team. All the countries had backup teams in case they had an accident or something. And I found them skiing on a practice hill.
Mm-hmm.
And they agreed to, and I needed something for photography.
Right. They carried cameras as they were going down the slope.
That's right. Well, I had to position cameras down the slope, so I'd catch them going by and things like that. And yes, they were lovely people. And I can remember standing in very cold weather in Grenoble, on some main road in Grenoble. The ski run went right over this road, or under it, I'm not quite sure which. It was a good place for me to be. I could catch the skiers at the top of the run. I could see the top of the run from where I was. Mm-hmm. And get them going by in a camera. And that was a lot of fun. They were all nice young people from a whole bunch of nationalities. Fortunately for me, all the Europeans apparently speak English.
Yes.
And so I could talk to them all. And not only that, they spoke it almost flawlessly without an accent. So I was always amazed.
Although when you, I don't know whether it was that time or when you were in Paris, but the people working for you were convinced that you were fluent in French.
Well, because I was Canadian.
Yeah.
They knew that we had French Canadians, and so they just assumed that I was fluent in French. And I had to dredge up a lot of French that I didn't know I knew.
Right.
In order to keep track of them.
Apparently you had some expression that you used which convinced them that you must...
Oh yeah, it was something I said that only a French-speaking person would say.
Right.
I've forgotten what it was. But yes, that's true. I remember that. Oh, you speak French.
Right.
I said, I don't speak French. Oh, you do, because you do speak French. You never convinced I had marginal French skills. They said, I remember one of them saying, we're not saying anything behind your back. You know that. You don't have to pretend not to speak French.
Right.
I remember that line. It was quite funny. But I did speak a lot more French. I was able actually to make myself understood and to understand. I could understand more than I could make myself understood.
Right.
Which is usually the case.
And I know you went other places. You went down to the Caribbean. I can't remember what island you were.
It was just off. It's just off the rounded part of South America. There was a little island just off there, which was a Canadian, not a sort of protectorate or something. It had some relationship with the Canadian government.
No, I don't know. I didn't know we had an island.
We didn't own it, but we had some kind of an international relationship, and it was and Canada gave them support of some sort.
Right.
And they were glad to see a Canadian, so as a result, and they were lovely. It was a wonderful location. The weather was amazing. It was almost on the equator, or was it just?
Well, yeah, that's right. It's quite a bit south.
It was just slightly north, I think, of the equator line. And the weather was amazing, and the water and everything was amazing, and the kinds of fish, of water animals and things I would see was even scary. But things I'd never seen before.
Because you had friends down there that you hung out with. I can't remember their name right now, but
I did. There was a Canadian group.
But they ran some sort of sailing.
They were down there doing
business.
So they had some kind of a bed and breakfast or something. Business.
Right, and I think they
also taught sailing.
Took people out on the boat or whatever.
That's right. They had a boat, and they would so people wanted to go out and experience. And I think maybe they did teach some sailing. They took me out on the boat. It was a lot of fun.
their name's on the tip of my tongue. I just can't think of it right now.
I can't think of it at all.
So anyway, you worked with a bunch of people at McCann. I can think of some names. Stuart Eaton.
Yeah, Stu was a Scot.
Yes,
through and through.
very Scottish.
He was
yes.
the head of the creative department.
Mm-hmm.
And Stuart was a wonderful man. He had such a lovely accent. He was very bright and knew a lot of things. I knew a lot of things I didn't know. But he was just he was just a delightful person to work with and to have any contact with at all.
And Jack Gonder?
And Jack was a supplier of mine, and Jack and I got to be good friends. But I don't know.
So, but there were some people that you worked with that eventually you got together to form your own business. So, Ben McPeak was working with you.
Oh, I used Ben. I used Ben for music. Ben was
Right.
a wonderful jingle writer.
He was known as Mr. Jingle.
He
I
was
believe.
known as Mr. Jingle. He'd done like something like 2,000 jingles
Right.
or something weird. And Ben was a gifted musician. He had a little recording studio where he could do demos and things, at where his office was, and but he could just sit down and write you anything musical at any moment. He was just so gifted musically, and literally could play any instrument, although he mostly played piano. But he was and a lovely person. He was just a terrific man.
And did Jack Richardson work for McCann also?
And Jack and I, yeah, he was an account guy on Coke. We both worked
Yeah.
on the Coke account. That's how Jack and I got to know each other. And Jack, of course, is. They had him in the agency because they'd hired him because Coke was in the music, and Jack was a schooled musician,
Right.
played up stand-up bass, but he was a schooled musician. He could read and write music, and they needed somebody who could. Who was musical, because nobody else in the account had any idea what music was all about. So Jack became an account executive because he was a musician.
And where was Alan McMillan? What did he do?
Alan worked for Ben. He was basically wrote. He was a pianist
Mm-hmm.
and a composer, and he wrote most of Ben's arrangements and things.
Okay.
For various accounts. He's quite a gifted musician and writer.
So what made you guys decide to form a music production company?
Oh, we were pretty stupid, I guess, and but we were all friends and we talked about it and decided there was because in Toronto there was no creative music company writing things. There was a couple of places you could record things. A couple of studios, but there was no creative force, and we thought there was a vacancy there.
And this is in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
And you called your company Nimbus 9.
We did. I made that name up. We didn't know what to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason I wanted to call it something else, but the name was already taken, so I had to settle on Nimbus 9.
Well, it's a nice play on Cloud 9.
Well, that was the whole point of it.
Right.
I wanted to call it Cloud. Oh yeah, that's right. I wanted to call it Cloud 9, but there was some reason I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I've forgotten what the reason was. It may have been in use, perhaps, but I couldn't. So I decided Nimbus 9 was as close as I could get, and everybody seemed to like it.
So you got a studio down in Yorkville.
Well, we had a studio.
Built your own studio.
We built our studio and offices in Yorkville.
Right.
And
Hazelton Lanes or something.
Yeah, pretty much in that area. And we needed a demo studio. We needed to do demo tracks. So we built a demo studio, which which had better acoustics than any studio in the city. People wanted to come and record things there. So eventually, we spent a lot of time with people actually doing their finished recordings with us because of the sound. Sound's an amazing thing, and it's difficult to get it right. To get a real bass response is the hardest thing you can do in life and in a studio. Because in a studio, the frequencies will be found in various parts of the studio. For some reason, the highs are the hardest things to control. They go everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Low notes
go everywhere. Yeah.
Low notes are the hardest things. They go everywhere. The high notes are fine because the higher you get, the more directional they are, and so they were easy. But when you got down to 60 or 120 cycles or something, it was everywhere.
So you guys pioneered this technique called direct-to-disc.
Well, there was a company that we were doing business with, either in San Francisco, that had to put out a thing where they recorded directly to the recording medium, which was a kind of a record.
Well, basically the master
the things they cut masters on,
right,
which was like a soft disc. You could the needle would cut the groove, and then you'd take that and make a metal plate of it, so you'd have something that wouldn't wear out.
Right, and that would then be used to print the records.
You'd make all the records from that master, yeah.
But everybody used, when they were recording, it went to tape, and then they used the tape to make the master.
That's right.
And you were cutting that out of the process.
We discovered you could go direct to disc, and if you did that, you got amazing sound.
Right.
Because when you went to the tape, and then you went from the tape to you just lost bottom end, top end, and all kinds of stuff happened. But if you could record, one company in California was doing it. We had some relationship with them, and we decided we'd try it, see if we could do it. So we had, it was tricky to get it set up right to do it, but we had a genius, I forgot who he is now, but we had a marvelous engineer come from the West Coast. He stayed with us for 3 months. We put him up in an apartment, and he just lived with us.
Mm-hmm.
And he developed the whole direct-to-disc operation for us because he knew exactly what he needed. And what he did was everything you introduce between the sound and the disc alters the sound to some degree. And so he kept removing various things until we went direct to disc. That's where it all came from.
Right.
We went right to the recording. We recorded directly to the recording head, mm-hmm. which one other company in California was doing, and it was getting amazing results. And we thought, and we were able to do it because of the amazing engineers we had.
And the factory that made the records was in Germany, so you had to fly.
Well, the thing about that is that the best discs were being made in Germany at that time, and we wanted to have the best we could get. So I would take the master, which we had cut, and then you had to plate it with metal and stuff, and I would take the plated piece and take the metal and take it to Germany.
Right.
And
in your lap on the plane.
In my lap, I couldn't do it today. They would arrest me or something.
Yes.
But in those days, I could take a piece of metal on my lap right through all there were no borders and things. Well, I mean, no alarms going off.
Right.
And so I would take the master from which the pressing pieces were made. It was a reverse.
Right.
Reverse. So the positive pieces would be plated from it and put on the presses. And the gob of hot stuff would be put down, and then this thing would press it out into a record that you could put on.
Right.
Don't make them anymore.
Well, they're actually coming back.
The thing about it was
LPs.
You got better sound out of it. They made these LP things where they made out of different materials, but the manner of manufacturing with a glob of plastic pressed out on a press actually made better sound, and so we made the very expensive records we were making out of these old-fashioned records that we could produce.
Yeah, well, there is making a bit of a comeback. There's some small companies making records again now.
That's right. Well, there are not many people playing records anymore. They play tapes and discs and things because they're convenient.
So anyway, you basically had the best recording studio in Canada, if not North America.
We got a reputation
Yeah.
for sound. The studio, they like the basic thing starts with the studio, and after that the mic takes the sounds it's getting and the whole rest of it. But the basic thing has to occur in the blocks that you're recording in the studio. And we had a studio that had amazing sound response, as it turned out.
Right.
Somehow this got to be known rather quickly, and major recording artists were showing up at the door, like the Beatles.
Right. So you had I guess I guess your breakthrough was with the Guess Who, right?
Well, we had this sound. Jack Richardson had discovered a group in Winnipeg, working in a small club or somewhere, and they had named themselves the Guess Who. And Jack said he thought they were amazing, and brought them to Toronto, and we would do some test recording with them.
Mm-hmm.
And we the first thing we recorded was a breakthrough record in the USA. It was quite amazing.
American Woman.
Jack was totally responsible for the fact that we were ever able to do anything because he just had such good ears and things, and he knew the musicians because he was a musician. He could persuade them not to get upset and things.
Right.
And then we made this disc which Jack took off to somebody he knew in New York, and they said they were knocked out by the sound, and so we got into the direct-to-disc business, which was just a peripheral business, but
mm-hmm.
for a while it was sort of important, and if you could do it, it gave you a bit of an aura as a studio and stuff.
Well, I mean, then you got a lot of people. You got George Harrison. You got Alice Cooper.
People wanted to get the sound, and Alice.
Even the Bay City Rollers.
The Bay City Rollers, which were a one-hit wonder.
They were the ones that caused the riot, right? Outside your studio.
We never told anybody who was recording with us, but somebody in the Rollers they had a very young audience. Basically, very young audience, and so one of the Bay City Rollers decided to let Toronto kids know that they were going to be at our studio. We didn't tell anybody, we never would, but they came in to us, and the next day I think we had 200 kids in front of the studio.
Mm-hmm.
And the police were knocking on our door saying, "What on earth were we doing?" And we said it wasn't our fault. We couldn't. These kids just were collecting. We weren't telling them to collect. And so for the next 5 weeks, took 5 weeks to do the album with the Bay City Rollers, and for 5 weeks we had 200 kids in front of the studio all the time. To get in was quite unnerving. You walked in with 200 sets of eyeballs on you
mm-hmm.
as you went through the door. It's quite a sensation.
So, but you got to spend a lot of quality time with Alice Cooper.
Alice is a wonderful man. Alice was a real gentleman, and we saw a lot of him because he'd come. He would have to spend 5 weeks with us or something. We had an apartment down the street where we put people up like that. And Alice liked Toronto because nobody knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
He could go out in the street as his real person and wander around Yorkville, which was a really interesting district then,
mm-hmm.
and not be bothered by anybody because his fans were constantly, when they knew who he was there, just lining up by the hundreds and
mm-hmm.
thousands. And but we never told anybody. Nobody knew until somebody finally found out. But Alice loved it. He lived in our apartment, wander through Yorkville, and be a human being for a little while, just a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
And he was such a nice man, just a terrific person. Talented, very talented artist.
Right. Anyway, so you guys did this for a few years. I remember you all drove Porsches, and
yes, I had a Porsche.
I drove it too. I remember I got it in an accident.
Oh,
I
yeah.
totaled it.
That's right, you did. I don't
Well, it wasn't total. It was just.
messed up.
It wasn't my fault. The car ran into the side.
That's right.
And
Not your fault at all.
but it sort of ran its course. This
Well, Direct to Disc,
Nimbus 9.
Nimbus 9, well, as things do, the various creative forces, creative people and everything, they get a little edgy after a while and want to try something else. But for a while, and Jack Richardson got sick and died.
No, Ben McPeak got sick and died.
Oh, so did Jack.
Jack lasted a long time.
Yes, he did. Well, Ben
It was
got
Ben
sick.
that got sick.
Ben got sick and died, and then Jack had to get sick and die too.
Jack went off to work for what school that was,
That's right. He did.
Fanshawe or whatever.
Fanshawe. That's right. He taught music.
Right.
He became a professor of music.
So he lasted quite a while because I met him at your 75th birthday. He was
That's right.
there,
No,
so.
no, he did fine. He
Yeah.
lasted. Yes, he did.
I think
wore out finally.
yeah, I think shortly after that.
He was Jack was always overweight.
Right.
It didn't do him any good.
Mm-hmm.
He was a lovely human being, but he's a tubby little man, and had carried too much weight around.
Right.
He was actually a beautiful person. Loved him.
And so
And
then
we were such good friends. He and I were in the agency. The agency had hired him because Coca-Cola was getting into music, and they needed somebody who actually could speak music.
Right.
And they hired Jack to be an account executive who could talk to the client doing music.
Right.
And that's how he got into the agency on the Coca-Cola account.
One of the funny things, sort of as life imitating art or the other way around, I know you haven't watched the series Mad Men too much, but
No.
of course it was set at exactly the same time you were in the ad agency, and the main character, Don Draper.
I thought I recognized myself.
Yeah, well, the main character, Don Draper, had the Coca-Cola account, and at the end, the last episode, they're writing the famous jingle, "I want to teach the world to sing."
I know.
And but you actually knew the real person that wrote that jingle and everything, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I had to record it and everything a lot. But he was American.
It was done by the U.S. Coke ad.
That's right.
Although McCann had the worldwide for Coke,
McCann
right?
had Coke around the world.
Yeah.
But it was done in New York by a New York musician.
Mm-hmm.
And who became a friend of mine for a while.
So eventually, though, you went back, you switched sides and started working for the companies, not the ad agencies, so that you went to work for the Molson companies.
Yes.
And
almost.
Beaver Lumber.
They needed some guidance in terms of creative and stuff.
But then you became the person dealing with the ad agencies, right?
That's right. They had nobody to talk to the agency. They couldn't make them understand anything, but they could talk to me, and I could understand because I had sort of a background because I'd been not just a creative person, but an account executive, and I spoke account executive, so it's a language all its own.
Right.
And so I could talk to the agency, and then I could talk to the musicians, and I could talk to the clients, and that was a lot of fun for a while. But I got some respect.
But I think the job you really enjoyed was working for Beaver Lumber.
But Beaver was a whole other thing, and it was a lovely thing, because I got to begin with. Everybody, they hired me because they were getting into music and stuff, and I got to know all the. They had I don't know 100 different offices. They had a huge number of offices across Canada, maybe not that many, and I got to know all the guys, and they were all really nice people and wanting to help Beaver Lumber and stuff, and I'm glad to have any advice they could get. And I worked for a wonderful man who ran the department, Jim Baird, Jim and I really hit it off. While he was the divisional vice president, it was the best years of my life. Jim and I just liked each other a lot, and everybody liked Jim because he had come up through the ranks and he really spoke the language that the dealers spoke. He was tremendously respected by all the dealers.
Because it was a franchise thing, right? So
it was all franchises. So you had to be
each store was owned by
each group had to be persuaded to a degree that they were getting the best thing they wanted, that they were going to get in terms of support and stuff. Well, Jim, they just loved Jim. He was because he was one of them, and everything he said had merit. And Jim and I, he just liked me, and I liked him enormously. And he'd take me around with him to all the dealers, so I got respect because I was with Jim.
Right, because you're on the road a lot. You had to drive up to North Bay or whatever.
Oh, we were on the road. We were on the road all the time. We had, for a while there, it was really good fun. We went right across Ontario.
So was it
Jim?
the
Ontario division.
Yeah, but was it Jim that felt he couldn't write anything, and you had?
No, that was the whole point.
You had to write everything.
Jim loved me because he was fixated on the fact that he couldn't express himself in a writing. I wrote everything for him. He couldn't write a letter. He couldn't write a memo, and so that's why he had me around.
Mm-hmm.
And he would say, "Now this is what I want to say," and then I would write it for him.
Right.
And he'd say, "Well, I'm going to change that." But he just couldn't put pen to paper, and that was wonderful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew everything that he had, because he had to talk to everybody. He had to talk to senior executives and everybody, and I got to write everything that he had to send to anybody, including the president. So I was right in the know there for a while. It's like, and we became such good friends. He was just a lovely, lovely man. He had to leave finally because his wife got sick.
Right,
So
and that was...
He decided to go and look after her instead. He and I were going to go into business together, set up a company to do all the advertising requirements for all the dealers.
Right.
And this is great because everybody thought he was the best thing in sliced tomatoes, and totally respected anything he suggested. And he liked me and believed everything I said had some merit. So we were going to be a team, and we were going to set up a company, and it would have been a great company. We would have done very well. But then his wife got ill, and he just had to give it up, and he didn't go and look after her. She got cancer or something.
And that was around the time you retired, or just before you retired?
Well, I got out of the business, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap it up. We've covered about 45 years of your working life.
So quick, so fast.
1950 to 1995 or so. And so stay tuned for our next episode.